Advisory Council. We are going to have a nice full agenda today because we want to make sure that you end your week strong. And I'm anticipating that based on how today's conversation goes, we may also have a nice, really robust agenda for next time and maybe even a little homework in between. So first, what I'm going to do is pull up my notes so that I know what we're doing next. And I think we'd like to just start with some introductions. I believe our custom is to go around and have all council members identify themselves. So I will start. Hi, Susanna Davis, representing the Office of Racial Equity, member of the council. And I'm beyond the desire to call on people, so please feel free to unmute and go around the room.
I am Phil Sussman, the governor's representative. Thank you.
Yep, I'm Mark Holmes. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the Agency of Digital Services, as well as co-chair for this committee.
Ron LaFond, I'm the director of Vermont Homeland Security Unit, and I'm representing DPS.
Happy Friday, everyone. Jess Vintiner with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development.
I'll go next. This is my first time joining this meeting. My name is Josh Blumberg. I'm Educational Technology Program Manager in the Agency of Education. So I'm joining from the Agency of Ed.
Welcome.
It's Curtis, State of Vermont, Assistant Attorney General, and I just dropped that in the chat. It's a quick and easy way to save time at these meetings.
Thank you. And Amanda.
Yeah, Amanda Jones. I am the DMI Director at the Vermont Department of Health, and I represent Department of Health.
All right, thanks everyone.
And John.
I believe, oh, sorry. So sorry, John.
Oh, no worries. John Cohn, I work at Beta Technologies, but I'm here representing the Vermont Academy of Science and Engineering.
All right. We also have some besties who tend to join us on the regular, and we have a couple of new besties who have joined the league. So I'm actually going to ask Josiah to introduce us to some new friends.
Yeah, so Josh, I know you already introduced yourself. Do you want to do like the 1 minute on your role at AOE and how that work intersects the AI Council and how we can be helpful to you?
Sure. So I'm leading for the AOE, thinking about AI guidance out to K-12 schools throughout the state. So, and then I think also helping a bit internally, thinking about how do we use AI internally as AOE staff, and that probably really directly overlaps with this council. And so in terms of K-12, it's thinking about the professional development, guidance around policies and kind of support, as well as eventually thinking around AI literacy in terms of what do our students need to learn when.
Cool, thank you. And then Drake, do you want to introduce yourself and talk about, same question, how your work intersects with the AI Council and how we can be helpful to you?
Sure. Thanks, Josiah. My name is Drake Turner. I'm the Deputy Director of the new Office of Workforce Strategy and Development, which was created by the legislature last year. So we're housed within the Department of Labor. And we're tasked with coordinating workforce development efforts in Vermont, which includes overseeing and supporting the work of Vermont State Workforce Development Board, which was also reorganized this year. So there's a new group of folks supporting that work. And then we work with state agencies and private partners to really develop strategies for a comprehensive and integrated workforce education and training strategies, and align workforce efforts with other agencies. So Josiah and Miles had reached out to myself and Sabina Haskell, who's the executive director of the office, to talk about all of the great work happening when it comes to AI. So really, I think we're here to understand more about what y'all are working on and determine how we can support your work and also integrate AI even more closely into our workforce development efforts. So really here to learn and excited to work with y'all.
Excellent. Thank you both. And there are a few other AI focused folks who are appearing at various agencies. So I know the Agency of Transportation just hired Rose one of her roles is their AI advisor. She'll be joining us for future meetings, but couldn't today. So these are folks who are going to be working in state government directly on AI with domain knowledge that's relevant to the council. And so I wanted to make sure that you all knew who they were when they were showing up on these meetings and knew them as resources to tap. So with that, Susanna, I'll toss it back to you, and maybe Miles, if you want to put the agenda back up.
Yeah, sounds good. Here we go. So should be able to see the agenda now. We'll just be beginning with some meta updates regarding the AI Council. And then I have a few points that I wanted to bring up regarding ongoing trends in AI technology and how that technology is changing with time, mainly with the focus on the rise of agentic AI systems. Then I wanted to briefly discuss some potential updates to our AI policies with a focus specifically on education. Then I'll be turning it over to Josiah, which will hopefully take up the bulk of our time here because he has quite a bit to discuss regarding AI and privacy legislation. So.
Perfect.
So before we jump into the AI Council updates and I hand off to do that, I also just wanted to briefly mention that we have a couple of folks joining the call today who are part of our Catalyte program. This is a really exciting workforce apprenticeship program that is geared towards providing mid-career professionals with the opportunity to switch over to working in the tech sector following a pretty rigorous apprenticeship. And these folks have just finished the training component of this program, and they joined ADS this week. And we're very excited to have them here. I know it looks like Brendan and Alex are here on the call today. So.
And they're working on data and AI implementations with our crew as of Tuesday. So not too deep into it yet, but we're excited to have them.
All right, so next we can move on to the AI Council updates.
Sure.
So go ahead.
I don't know how we want to introduce this, Susanna, so I'll let you.
Okay, we'll just rip that Band-Aid off. We have some changes coming up to our council roster. So as you all know, we are here, dearly beloved, gathered here today because some appointing authority told us to come here. And one of those appointing authorities has recently updated the selection. So Mark, do you want to?
Yeah, and as seems to be the trend in my life as I've gotten older, I seem to be leaving the party just as it's getting good, because it was really really exciting to hear all the new attendees and sort of their roles and sort of the interests that they're going to have going forward. So but I will still be watching from a close distance, not from afar. But I've been a part of this council as well as its predecessor, which recommended this council. And I got to say, the work that Vermont has done and has been so proactive and, being really a thought leader across the nation is one major source of pride for us. And I think that's sort of the construct that's got us all here together and working so well. But I think the other thing that, as I was thinking back, that we should all be most proud of is just how we did those things. I think the last 3 years of this council and the several years prior to that with the other committee were some of the most collaborative. We idea sharing, learning things from one another, never afraid to express a concern while also, expressing hopes and everything else amongst ourselves to each other as we tackled these kinds of, these sort of generational forming issues. So I think the how, as I leave, is something I want to thank everybody who's been a part of this with me for contributing to. I'm not generally an emotional person at work. I am when it comes to soccer, but not at work. But this is something that's got me a little emotional, and I do. I want to thank you guys. Thank you all. So. The long and
And-
short of it. Oh, I forgot to mention the how. So, or the what. So I will be being replaced as the appointee by Mr. Josiah Raish, who, I waited until Josiah was ready because there was really only one other person who should ever gotten this appointment from our secretary. So it's all yours, JR.
Thank you. And I know that I will miss having you on the council, and make sure you do stay close, because we still want you around.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, John. It's been so many. The Christmas periods with you have always been the most fun, John.
Yep. I've got a new twist on that. Just wait till this year.
Oh man, I will be. I'll join back in for those for sure.
All right.
Great. Oh, go ahead.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Josiah. Along those lines, thinking about all of the interests that this group has generated, incoming members, outgoing members, one of the things that came up in a recent informal chat brainstorming session, I guess, was a lot of the exciting possibilities that are out there on the horizon with respect to AI and policy around it. And I thought that it might be worth mentioning to this group that if we are interested, we might benefit from doing some kind of a work plan or recitation of our vision, or something that we can put on paper that carves out what we see as our lane or our upcoming priorities for perhaps the next year. I know, of course, we do have a statutory charge, and that largely dictates some of the work that we do. But what I find is that the greatest excitement that I get from statutory mandates is everything that the mandates don't mention, and all of the added layers and creativity and nuance that we can add to it that perhaps may not have been contemplated or rigidly defined in the law. So I'm going to open this idea to the group in general. Is this something that you're interested in? I know I've phrased it a little bit in a nebulous way, and that's on purpose, because I want to know whether you all see a need for us to do any of that kind of visioning work, and if so, what do you think would be a good fit for this group?
I'm Josiah, and I'm a council member now for the first time. So I think that this is a great, I think doing some work along these lines to think about the vision, to think about how we can support folks like Josh and Drake and others more effectively, I think is really important going forward. And so kind of looking at our charge and doing some road mapping and visioning, I think would be great.
For me,
Sean, go for it.
I think it's an opportunity, sort of for looking forward for a vision. We've spent a lot of time making sure for good cause, making sure that there's no harm, that we minimize the harms and have maximize protections on data, on AI and its use in the state. I think it would be really interesting in the second part to, in addition to doing that, thinking about how we would best utilize AI for benefit for the state. To actually turn that conversation over and make it, think about things we could do to enhance the value to state government, et cetera. We've talked about it in this meeting, but we haven't really put a lot of energy into what we might do there to help maximize benefit. So I see visioning around that to be very useful.
Other thoughts? Anyone hate it? That's allowed.
It very much.
If I was going to jump on top of, I'm sorry, Susanna, I should have raised my hand. if I was going to jump on top of what John said, and I appreciate that very much, sir, I would say the next question would be, what is our vision for infrastructure to be able to reach those goals? So what do we need to think about and put forward in turn? And we have folks from education and workforce and other capabilities that would be required for us to be able to actually, I don't want to take the word actually out, sorry about that, for us to be able to reach the goals or reach our vision. Over.
Hey, Shusana, can I ask a question about one thing that I've seen work in other organizations and boards, which of course are different, is to actually have a facilitated session in terms of visioning and strategy.
Mhm.
And it might be great to do like an afternoon, like a 3 or 4 hour session in person in terms of, some with a good facilitator. Not that we aren't, but having somebody who doesn't necessarily have a role in the council, but sort of facilitating us getting our words down. I don't know if you're thinking about creating a document over a larger period of time, but that might be fun and efficient.
I completely agree. I think a facilitated session would be really, really great. And we can do some legwork to identify who might be good at that. If anybody in this group knows someone who may be good to do that, all suggestions welcome. And I also hear, so I'm hearing the bare bones of a thought exercise being laid out, looking at what do we want and also what's it going to take. And I imagine there's a lot of granularity that we could find in that what's it going to take, right? That was to Phil's point about infrastructure and supports. So maybe to keep us moving in this meeting, we can start thinking about putting together each our ideas around those questions. In the meantime, if it's all right with you all, I can start looking into who might be good to facilitate. I think that maybe a good timeline might be to look at maybe November for this. And the reason for that is because, again, I do think that it's potentially our next meeting. We may need to handle a lot of follow-up items, in which case I want to reserve that time. But it would be good to set us up for the session coming up in January, if maybe we could round out this calendar year with that. The question about doing it in person, I would pose that back to the group. I don't know where everyone is coming from and whether people are interested in gathering. I think there's a lot of value in doing things in person, but I also want to recognize everybody has different needs. So I'd love to hear more voices about whether you'd be willing to do something in person, and if so, where do you think that could happen?
In person sounds great, and I'm happy to host it at our place, which is the DMV building in Montpelier. It does still need to be a public meeting, I believe, which we have the infrastructure for. But I'm also open if other people have great ideas about hosting as well.
Okay.
Sorry, I was
go ahead.
gonna, oh, it's okay. I was gonna say a hybrid option would be best for me if at all possible as a remote employee, but I also don't want to take away from anyone's desire to fully meet in person. So
Thanks, Jess.
1 second, Diane. I'm on a call.
So perhaps to keep things going, I'll just invite you all to maybe put in the chat, or you can find a way to message me directly if you're coming from particularly far. I know that generally when we think about central points in the state, we look at places like Randolph. I know in the past, some of our working groups have reserved space at the Vermont Law and Graduate School, as those are technically more central to this in the state. But depending on where everyone else is coming from, it might be the case that maybe Montpelier or Waterbury does work. So more people need to tell me so that I don't ruin your life with a long drive. And in the meantime, look out for more details about facilitator, etc. I know this doesn't feel tremendously concrete, but do we feel like we have at least enough to go on to start making moves on it? Okay. All right, Josiah, I think you are up again.
I was,
Miles, perhaps?
yes, yeah, thank you. And I was just briefly going to give some updates regarding advancements in AI technology. The main paradigm that I wanted to discuss that we didn't have a chance to go over at our last meeting is this ongoing trend that's really increased notably this year, where we are shifting from standalone AI tools like ChatGPT that you consciously interact with to complex systems where AI autonomously or semi-autonomously interacts between various applications with considerably less human input. This is facilitated by a couple of technical paradigms that have arisen over the past year or so. One that I mentioned here is called Model Context Protocol. This is very high level, essentially like a universal USB adapter that you can apply to large language models as a layer that sits on top of the model and makes it much simpler to plug it into various applications, like say an IT ticketing system, for example. Whereas the old way that we would do this would be more analogous to trying to wire something by hand and would have the resultant reliability and maintainability issues that would entail. These newer paradigms make it much easier to incorporate AI into systems as a linkage between applications, such that humans no longer necessarily have to be doing all of the burdensome manual effort to do things like manually enter IT tickets or download something from one application and upload it to another. Concurrently, we're also seeing increasing integration of AI tools throughout tech ecosystems by virtually all of the major tech companies. One example is Microsoft Copilot, where similarly, this is becoming more of a centralized component of all Microsoft applications, more so than the previous model of just a simple chatbot that you could talk to that would answer questions. So this is all providing quite a few significant risks and opportunities. These increasingly integrated AI systems, they provide significant risks from a data privacy and security perspective. Robust data governance is always a central foundation for any successful AI implementation, but that's really going to get more and more important as these increasingly centralized AI systems will inherently have access to more and more user data as this trend continues. At the same time, there are also some concerns relating to the resilience of these highly technically dependent systems, right? So how can we ensure that these types of autonomous systems have human fail-safes in place for when the AI technology component inevitably fails, which it likely will, at some point for any given application. So there's substantial consideration that we need to keep in mind there with regards to how we can ensure that our systems are still usable by humans as they become more and more autonomous. And then the third thing that I have identified that we've been thinking about a great deal is obviously the risk of future job displacement. We're not at a point or even close to a point where AI can do everything, but as its capabilities continue increasing and as it gets more and more integrated into our daily workflows, that is an ever-present concern. At the same time, I think that there are some critical opportunities here. That the main one is improved process efficiency. We talked with a team within our finance department yesterday who's interested in piloting an AI use case for a manual process that they have to undertake hundreds of times a month, where they're manually uploading invoices from vendors, manually entering the data that's contained on those invoices. And it has occurred to us that this is something that existing artificial intelligence tools could do with these new paradigms. We can plug them into the systems that they're already using. And this could save considerable person hours, as well as improving the accuracy of the output compared to a human who's having to sit here and do this type of mundane data entry work for hours per month. Concurrently, that gives more time for workers to focus on human-centered tasks and the type of tasks that humans actually enjoy doing and are still substantially better at doing than artificial intelligence. So I think that, you know, like any of the trends that we've seen in artificial intelligence, that there are some concerns that we need to stay readily aware of, but there are also a lot of opportunities and potential benefits that we shouldn't be shying away from. In terms of how we're thinking about this from an implementation and policy perspective, I think that education is arguably the most critical component here, specifically with regards to educating our state workforce on not only how to use current AI tools, but what the future is likely going to look like as these become more and more integrated into their daily workflows. It's also critical as we're identifying potential pilots and use cases to make sure that they are actually the types of problems that AI is optimized to solve, rather than creating pilots for the sake of just doing artificial intelligence. There are a lot of critical use cases that could be applicable here throughout state government, and collaborating across agencies to identify those and make sure that we're prioritizing the things that are actually going to be most beneficial to our workforce and our constituents, I think is really critical. Relatedly, I think in many respects, our aim is to start with small pilot programs. Once we identify a pertinent use case and build out what the solution will look like, starting small enables us to ensure that whatever we're building is configurable and modular and can also be applied to other use cases throughout government that we haven't necessarily identified yet. And there's also, of course, lower risk, and it's much easier to manage from, you know, both a systems perspective and then also an education and adoption perspective if it's smaller and simpler to start. And to kind of wrap up this slide on the policy side, I do think that it is important for us to consider from a policy perspective that artificial intelligence is changing. Yeah, it's changing from a discrete tool like ChatGPT that we consciously decide to access and then go use, more towards this model of being an internal component of complex automated systems. And taking this document upload example that I mentioned, if an AI system is automatically extracting information from a document like an invoice that a user is uploading to the system, and then the AI is automatically exporting that data to another software application, say for reporting purposes, a user who's not familiar with artificial intelligence may not even intuitively know that AI is being used there, right? It's not like using ChatGPT where a little chat bubble will pop up and you can talk to it. So ensuring that our educational goals and our policies are in alignment with this shift to these more complex systems where the AI component may not be readily visible, I think is really going to be critical. Before I move on, does anybody have any questions regarding this slide? Cool. Josiah?
Yeah, thanks for taking us through this. I know you mentioned that there's policy and education considerations here. Are you seeing anything in our current approach or code of ethics or usage guidelines or even our evaluation? I guess, like, what parts of our current policy framework do you think might need to evolve in order to facilitate this?
Specifically, I think the Code of Ethics is a phenomenally robust and future-resistant document. So I obviously played no role in that, but those that did, I think did a fantastic job setting up an ethical framework for us. The guidelines on the use of generative artificial intelligence document, that's the first place that my mind goes, simply because by nature of that containing more specific guidelines that mention specific artificial intelligence tools, I think that we may need to broaden those guidelines somewhat, because currently they are referring primarily to public-facing AI tools like ChatGPT and Bard and Gemini and so on. But as time goes on, our employees are going to be interfacing more and more with different forms of artificial intelligence that don't necessarily have the same form as a chatbot that you consciously access on the internet and enter information into. So things like AI note-taking and meeting assistance, which has been a little bit of a policy challenge already, because we've had some instances where vendors have brought these automated assistants into calls without their knowledge. And, you know, some of these AI note-taking assistants have significant security risks inherent to the way that they upload user data. You know, I think that broadening the policy somewhat to more holistically capture the risks and acceptable usages for a broader suite of AI tools, I think is the direction that I would lean towards. Does that make sense?
This topic came up quite a few times early on when we were first thinking through policy at about, you know, what constitutes an AI tool. I think part of the education has to be, you know, if it's a procurement situation, et cetera, to make state employees aware of when something is AI, you know, because it's not always branded as Copilot's an interesting example because it's there, you know it. But so many other tools, you know, Adobe tools, for example, have AI kind of built in there. You don't even know you're using it. So I think kind of an idea of like what to look for in a tool to see, you know, if it's using AI in the spirit of what we mean. How do you notice it? What questions to ask? I think that's a really important thing because, like you say, somebody may be trying to sell a tool to you that does X without knowing that there's AI involved, and we have to be good stewards of that for the state.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Yeah, I do agree that the education component is certainly going to be critical there, and I appreciate your insights on that. And I do definitely think that at a high level, rather than trying to educate employees about every single possible tool or use case that they could come across, because this technology is changing so quickly, a better approach would probably be giving them the heuristics and the tools to be able to evaluate things and ask the right questions about the tools that they're using, like you said.
Yeah, because you'll never codify all of it because it's emerging so fast, as you said.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Josiah?
I think as I'm hearing you and John and Amanda in the chat talking about this, I think it makes sense that maybe there's another something that we prepare. So continue having guidance that's specific to like the use of ChatGPT or ChatGPT or, you know, kind of the chatbot flavor. That's one modality of using AI that I think is worthy of having its own guidance. But maybe something else that's more of a more general, like if you're using an AI powered tool in general, here are the things you need to be aware of, which may be like if it's already baked into a system, it's already a little bit constrained as to what data can be put into it. And like some of the stuff we said about chatbots doesn't necessarily make sense anymore. But there are other things that people need to be thinking about. I'm thinking of the like case management system where you speak your case notes and they get formatted and put into all the right parts of the case management system. Like that's very useful, but has maybe a different flavor of guidance that we need to provide than we would for the chatbots.
That makes a lot of sense as well. Thank you. And for a little bit of additional context here, we're currently working on an AI education module for state of Vermont employees facilitated through the Center of Achievement in Public Service at DHR. We just got started with this, so our aim is to have the education materials ready for employees to use within around 60 days or so. But that's all to say that we're working on building out the curriculum and the materials now. So my hope is that I'll be able to incorporate some of these ideas into what we're working on, because I do want this education module to be future looking, right? And I want it to still be relevant as this trend towards agentic AI continues, say, over the next year or two. So I will hopefully have a little bit more information about what we're including that I can run by the council when we next meet. But Yeah, I think before we move on to the legislative ideas, does anybody else have any points that they wanted to raise with regards to AI policy and education? All right. Well, thank you all. And we have just over 20 minutes left. So Josiah, I will turn it over to you now so that you can discuss the legislation piece. Do you want me to stop sharing so that you can, or should I just click
Nope.
through the slides? Okay.
You can keep sharing, and if you don't mind continuing your fabulous note taking, that would be wonderful too.
Will do.
So it's that time of year when there's an opportunity to suggest things for legislature. So over the last couple of years, there were a few ideas that came up. Some of those, like the deep porn statute, like ended up becoming real. But there are a few lingering that haven't yet. And so we wanted to start pulling together those ideas, and then seeing if there was opportunity to find somebody to sponsor them and move them forward. So based on our previous conversations and some work ADS has been doing, there are 3 kind of early stage AI ideas that we are exploring, and I'd love feedback on any of these. And then if there are other things that the council would like us to develop, we're happy to do that and to fold those in as well. I'm trying to kind of put together an AI package. One thing, just based on the current environment down in DC, we're trying to avoid anything that appears to be onerous or stifling in AI regulation. So we're trying to kind of narrowly target things, which I think you'll see here in a minute. But the 3 ideas that we're already exploring are, the first one, we had some discussion about how the current open data and public records law in an AI age can inadvertently create risks to Vermonters and to the state. So because you can use AI to do things like re-identification or to quickly process large amounts of information and gather signals that are relevant to IT security. I know Phil dropped, that's something he's mentioned a few times. We wanted to make some language updates to address that. Second one is, we talked about this almost a year ago, I think. New Jersey has passed their deepfake law. And so we've kind of taken that as inspiration and looked at Vermont statutes and hooked it into the computer crime statute. And then the third one is something we've talked about a few times here, that the data broker data sale process kind of vacuums up a lot of data in ways that are really relevant to AI training and are not always in the best interest of people. So having some regulation in the existing data broker statute to require them to document the provenance of the data that they're selling. So those are early stage ideas. They all need a fair bit more work to develop them. But I wanted to kind of take you on a speed run through them and then collect any initial thoughts that you all have. And then my hope is that next session, if any of you have other things that you would like us to explore and include, send those to me and Miles after this. And then we can discuss them and updates to these 3, depending on how they develop, at our next meeting. So with that, Miles, can you go on to the next one? So specific stuff around public records. So currently, state agencies and departments are directed to create rules around how they respond to public records and what they include that prevents the disruption of their business operations, fulfilling their missions. What we are suggesting is that agencies consider certain types of AI risks and work with us in ADS. So me, Miles as our director of AI, and Jake, who I think might be on the call as our director of data privacy, to establish practices for handling public records in 2 risk categories. So the first one is impacts to the privacy of Vermonters or state employees. And the second one is records that create physical or cybersecurity risks. So as a part of that, we're also suggesting that if we believe that requests are coming from advanced persistent threat actors or foreign powers, that agencies would have the opportunity to decline responding to those requests. Again, these are early stage ideas. I haven't reviewed them with council yet, so there are lots of implications to doing these things, but that's kind of the broad strokes of what we think would be a good bite to reducing these risks for AI specifically in public records and open data. Any questions on that one before I keep rolling, or any feedback on this idea?
I have a question. Sorry.
Yeah.
What do you envision the development of criteria? Actually, let me back up. Do there already exist criteria about how to reasonably rely on the suspicion that something is coming from advanced persistent threat actors, etc.?
Yeah, we are looking at the best ways to do that will be a reasonable safeguard and not block people who should have access to things from actually getting access. So what we are currently looking at is some lists and basically indicators that CISA, the federal cybersecurity agency, puts out, and using that kind of like their criteria as how we would implement this.
What you just said reminds me of a bigger question that I don't expect us to address today. And it's a question that actually is fitting for probably a lot of working groups in the state, which is when we're looking at federal guidance, are we looking at federal guidance that's been implemented as of this year, or longer standing stuff that has not been battered by the current?
Sure. This is stuff that they've had out for a long time and continue to update. So that is a great point, though. There's risk of any particular federal standard kind of changing under us at the moment. And that's something that we need to keep in mind.
Is there, for state government, you have centralized like email and IT, and I know that it must have threat protections in it. Do we know anything about how they're adapting to, you know, like increasingly well-crafted phishing and stuff like that? You know, is that already in your purview? Maybe one of you?
This is a bit of a different flavor because these public record requests come in through kind of our official public request mailboxes, and we're required to provide the records that are requested if they exist and they aren't otherwise exempted from being provided. So it's kind of a like,
oh, okay.
It's good, but you could ask for things that would not be appropriate, and that's kind of the safeguards we're trying to put in place.
Okay.
Mark can probably talk about the specifics on the email side, but I see Josh, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, what's nice about this one is it affects the public schools as well, I believe, because of the FOIA requests being covered. And I know some of the IT departments struggle when they get in these very open-ended FOIA requests.
That's a great point. Thank you. Mark, do you want to add anything about, or I also see Mr. Kaiser is on. He could probably add some too on that if you wanted.
Yeah, I was gonna deflect it to Dave because I think there's only so much we can actually talk about or should actually talk about in a public forum, and in terms of how we can respond to these things. So I'll leave it to yes in terms of John's question.
Sounds good.
Yes.
That's good. That's all I needed. I was sure that was the answer, I guess. the dumb question, but it seems like again an awareness. These attacks can come from so many different ways. But
Yeah, and I mean, I think the underarching point 12 that is it. We've gotten to a point across the cyber spectrum of risk and everything else to where it's bot versus bot, right?
Mhm.
We, as the
Yeah.
bad actors have adopted bots and AI to expand their everything they're doing, we've had to as well, in order to combat it and stay, just stay abreast, really.
Yeah.
Mr. Kaiser?
I would be very interested in the continuing conversation about defining the cybersecurity risks that you are talking about in item number 2 down there, and looking at it beyond APT foreign powers. What else can we define or use our tools to help identify?
Yeah, sounds good. Lots more discussion to be had here. I'm going to keep rolling in the interest of time and move on to deceptive deepfakes, if you don't mind advancing, Miles. Thank you. So the proposal is to add 3 new crimes to the computer crimes statute that target very narrowly deceptive deepfakes, and include carve-outs for protected speech, making reports to authorities, and then various service providers. New Jersey has done a lot of work on this. I was reading the as passed version, and there are a few things that I want to make sure that we fold into our proposed language from that. But the guts are these 3. So the first one is distributing a deceptive deepfake of a recognizable individual without their consent. You're not allowed to do that. So if you could recognize the person, with carve outs for, which we'll get to in a minute, you need their consent if you're distributing a deepfake of them. The second one is creating a deceptive deepfake with the intent of furthering some other crime. This becomes like an add-on charge. If you're doing something bad already, and then you're using a deepfake to do the bad thing more effectively. And then the third one, based on conversations with the council last year, we identified that it would be a crime to distribute a deceptive deepfake to recklessly interfere with elections, emergency services, or health and safety of people. That one's not in the New Jersey statute as such. We definitely need to do some workshopping on making sure that's narrowly targeted and would pass any First Amendment scrutiny. But those are the 3 big ideas. So if you recognize the person, you need their consent to distribute it. If you're using deepfakes to do something nefarious, and then the third one, if you're using deepfakes to recklessly endanger things. Miles, can you go to the next slide? And actually, let's go to the third slide and then come back. So slide 11, and then we'll come back to 10. So the carve outs, carve out criticism, comment, satire, parody, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research, or any of those that a reasonable viewer or listener would not believe to authentically depict speech or conduct. So that's kind of the deceptive piece of that. It has to be something that the reasonable person standard would believe to be authentic, and it is actually not authentic. That's one piece. And then also that is not being used for criticism, comment, satire, parody, news reporting, teaching, or scholarship. And then, Miles, if you can go to the one in the middle, this is the definition of deepfake, which I'll just leave up on the screen for you to ponder for a moment. And while you're pondering, open up this one to discussion. We have already talked about this one at some length early this year and maybe end of last year. We've been following the New Jersey bill for a bit over a year, but would love any feedback on this one. Cool. we'll make sure we circulate these slides later, and if anybody has feedback on them, on the ideas here, please do pass that along. And maybe we can look at, if anyone wants legalese, we can circulate that before the next meeting. All right, Miles, if you want to go to slide 12, which I believe is our final slide for these. So the idea of this one is to enhance privacy, especially in the age of AI, by requiring data brokers to maintain provenance of the data that they're collecting, and that would dovetail nicely with the legislature's work on comprehensive data privacy, and the requirements around consent, by saying that you actually have to maintain almost like chain of custody type of an idea, but basically the provenance of the data that was collected on the front end, you have to know where that data came from and that it was collected clean for data that's collected kind of after some start date. So probably sometime in 27 or maybe 28. So data collected after that date would need its provenance tracked throughout the life cycle, when it's being sold. So what this allows is that you can focus that requirement on data that's actually being collected for the purposes of sale, rather than on all data that's ever being collected. John, did you have a comment or a question?
A question, Josiah. I mean, I was very involved in this when I was working in Europe in GDPR, and they had similar guidelines on this, but there was no, norm for how you kept that information and how it passed with data to, different owners, et cetera, across company changes and stuff. Is that the same thing here? Is that everybody is left to their own on how they would maintain that data? In terms of provenance? I mean, from a chain of custody, it's kind of weird that you have a disjoint set of, well, I wrote it down somewhere, or,
Sure.
I don't know how that has evolved.
Yeah, I think again, this is early stage ideas. So what we're thinking so far is that we define what the minimum set of things that you have to have for provenance, which is who collected it originally, who gave it to the person who currently has it, when it was collected, and I think there's a fourth one. But like 4 things, and that's the minimum set of things that you need to be able to provide for any data set that you sell. So that's how we're looking at it, is it would be something that would happen during the sale transaction. There'd be a minimum of 4 things that would be provided with that data set to kind of demonstrate provenance.
Would this be something that we would, who is this directed at? Like if we had a contractor who was doing some data stuff for us?
So this would be in the data broker statute, which is
right.
In Vermont, it's defined, and probably Chris knows this better than I do, but it's defined as anyone who's selling data that they don't have like a first party relationship with the person whose data they're selling. That's kind of how we frame data broker. And then this this would apply to those entities. Now, so basically third parties that hold your data.
Would there be any oversight or enforcement? I mean, how we say thou shalt, how would we know that what they're doing to maintain these 4 pieces of information throughout that? We just say it, but how would we know whether what they had was adequate?
I'm certainly like very open to ideas on how to approach that. The thing that came to mind was when someone says, hey, I'm getting ads about my health condition, and I haven't posted that anywhere. Like, I don't think, like, I didn't consent to that information going anywhere for sale. So they would then report that. And then at that point, in order to prove that, no, we did have consent, that's when they would bring this.
Mostly for forensics, not.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yep. Chris, you have comment?
Yeah, just, I mean, the easy answer is that if companies are making representations about what they're doing or not doing to comply with Vermont law, and or they don't get consent in those circumstances, all of those, whether you say it or don't say it, they're all going to be deemed unfair or deceptive. And so those are violations of existing Consumer Protection Act, and we have all the powers and authority to enforce that law and impose fines and ask courts for injunctive relief and provide restitution to Vermonters. So the answer to your question is it lies in Title IX. These are commercial entities. They're buying and selling information, and the state would have all of its panoply of existing powers to pursue violations.
Mr. Kaiser?
Does it still require a complainant, i.e., are we putting the onus of action on an individual who's been wronged, or is there a different way to think about that?
I've been
Maybe.
thinking about it
We
so
we
far.
get
Oh, go ahead,
complaints
Chris.
all the time from news reports, public sources, companies themselves that make disclosures, reports that are issued. All of those might be the basis for a civil investigative demand under Title IX, or it may be complaint driven, and the agency might be responding to complaints from consumers. So the answer is both.
There are no
and
lack
all.
of trigger events by the sound of it.
I know we are close to time, so I want to toss it back to Susanna to open up for public comment. But really appreciate the feedback and thinking on this, and we'll bring these back next time with your great ideas that you've sent us in the meantime folded in. And don't feel like you're limited to these three. If there are other things that you see that either other states are doing or just other stuff that we should be looking at, please do send that along. And we'll get that folded into a potential package. And we'll talk about this more at our October session.
All right. Is there anyone on the call with us who is not a member of the council, who just has got to say something that has not been said before we close? I have waited the requisite number of seconds. If you are not a member of the council and you just couldn't find the unmute fast enough or couldn't type quickly enough, please do. I think that we have an email address. You can find us on the website. If not, you'll just have to come back in October. So really quickly, members, action items between now and then. You're going to keep thinking about this question on policy. We are going to work to identify a potential facilitator and venue for a visioning/work plan session, possibly for the November meeting. And in the meantime, you're just going to keep an eye on the robots because it's really us versus them. And we can't afford to lose this one. Anything else, Miles or Josiah, before we leave?
No, nothing else on my end, but thank you all. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.